Okay, let's crack open this deep dive. We've got this incredible stack of sources in front of us. Material from places like Cornell, University of KwaZulu-Natal, Adelaide, William and Mary, Christ Church Grammar, Pensium,
Yeah, really good mix.
and they're all sort of zeroes in on one of the most useful skills imaginable, actually learning how to learn more effectively.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because these sources really emphasize that it's not just about, the subject you're studying, but the approach,
Right.
the actual techniques you use to take information in, make it stick, and let's be honest, manage to actually focus in this crazy, distracting world.
Totally. So our mission here in this deep dive is pretty clear. We're going to try and cut through everything here and pull out the most impactful, evidence-based techniques these sources highlight.
Mm-hmm.
We want to give you the practical strategies you can start using right away to become, well, a more powerful learner. Get ready for some serious aha moments, because this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And I think to understand why these techniques even matter, we first have to face, the big enemy of learning, forgetting.
Oh, that nemesis.
Yeah.
It feels like sometimes you've just absorbed something, and then, I don't know, an hour later, poof, it's just gone.
Well, it's not just a feeling, it's a really well-documented problem. That Cornell source points to research showing we forget, a staggering 50% of what we hear within just 1 hour of, say, a lecture.
50% in an hour.
Yeah. And it gets worse. Over 70% is apparently gone within 2 days if you don't actively, work with that information somehow.
Wait, 70% in 2 days? That feels way worse than I thought. So just sitting there passively listening or reading, it's really incredibly inefficient.
Unfortunately, yeah, the sources strongly suggest that. That
Huh.
rapid decay, that's the forgetting curve that Hermann Ebbinghaus famously mapped out way back in 1885.
Ah, Ebbinghaus.
Right. Yeah, his data, which is referenced in the Christ Church Grammar source, it shows that steep drop-off. 62% forgotten after just 1 day if you don't review, 0.69% after 2 days, and a whopping 75% after 75 days if you basically do nothing.
Wow. Okay, that visual of the curve just plummeting,
Yeah.
that's a powerful argument for doing something active with the material.
Precisely. And the sources highlight other reasons why developing these effective techniques is so crucial beyond just fighting forgetting.
Like what?
Well, it demands concentration, right? When you're actively deciding what's important or wrestling with the material, your mind is actually engaged. There's less room for it to just wander off.
Right, yeah, it stops you being just a passive sponge hoping something sticks.
Exactly. And it also helps you zero in on what's, testable or most important. Instructors or authors, they emphasize key ideas, and these active methods kind of push you to identify and capture those points. Makes your study time much more focused.
Okay, so the problem is forgetting, and the solution involves being more active. Do the sources give us a kind of framework for figuring out which methods are actually the best ones?
They do. They introduce a really critical concept, particularly detailed in that University of KwaZulu-Natal source, and it draws on extensive research, like the Dunlosky paper from 2013.
Okay.
It's distinguishing between high-utility and low-utility learning techniques.
High utility versus low utility. Okay, so you're saying some really popular study methods might not actually be that effective, even though tons of people use them?
That's exactly what the research suggests, yeah. The sources list common methods that are rated as having, low utility for long-term retention and deep understanding, at least when they're used on their own.
Like what kind of methods?
Think about things like just rereading your notes multiple times, or, using highlighting as your main strategy, or even just summarizing material without integrating other active steps.
So highlighting everything in neon yellow and then just reading it again and again isn't the secret sauce. My high school self feels slightly attacked right now.
Apparently not the most efficient path, according to the evidence anyway. The sources note that highlighting often creates this false sense of familiarity. Okay.
You recognize the words, right, but you can't necessarily recall the information when the highlighter isn't there. Rereading has similar issues. Summarizing is a bit better because it requires some processing.
Yep.
But it's still rated lower utility compared to methods that involve more active retrieval, getting the information out.
Okay. So the key isn't just getting information in, it's working with it. It's getting it back out of your brain.
Exactly. The high utility techniques are the ones that force your brain to actively retrieve and process the information. And these sources really help narrow down which ones have the strongest evidence behind them. All right, let's dive into those high utility heroes then. Based on the sources, which one is top of the list?
Active recall. It's also commonly called practice testing.
Okay.
This is essentially self-quizzing. So instead of passively reading or reviewing, you actively try to pull the information from your memory.
So like closing the book and asking yourself, okay, what was the main point of that chapter? Or can I define this term without peeking?
Precisely. You're forcing your brain to do the work to retrieve it. The sources really emphasize that this effort significantly improves the durability of that memory. It strengthens the neural connections. Dunlosky's research rates it as high utility because it's both really effective and widely applicable across different subjects and learners.
And there are actual studies proving this works. It feels kind of intuitive, but does the data really back it up?
Oh, absolutely. There's the Spitzer study, way back in 1939.
Wow.
Yeah. It showed students who regularly tested themselves retained significantly more material over time compared to a group that just studied passively. They saw retention improvements of like 10–15% even in lower achieving students and up to 15% for the high achievers.
It's a really noticeable difference just from adding that self-testing element.
For sure. Then you have a more recent one, the Butler study from 2010. They found that a practice testing group didn't just remember facts better. They actually outperformed a rereading group by up to 30% on both factual questions and conceptual questions.
Getting better at understanding the concepts too, not just pure memorization. That's really powerful.
Yeah. And Karpik and Blunt in 2011 compared active recall to other methods like concept mapping and repeated reading. Guess what? The active recall group performed significantly better, especially on questions that required them to make inferences or apply the knowledge in new ways. It really shows that active recall helps you understand the structure and connections within the information, not just memorize isolated bits.
So it builds that deeper understanding. Okay, how does someone actually do this day to day?
Yeah.
The William and Mary source had some practical ideas, right?
Right, how to actually implement it. Well, classic methods include things like flashcards, especially good for facts or definitions. While you're taking notes, you could write potential questions in the margins and then later cover your main notes and use those questions to quiz yourself.
Oh, I like that. Built-in testing.
Yeah. Or, completing study questions that an instructor provides. That's a direct form of practice testing. Or you can create your own practice tests, or maybe use visual aids where you have to actively recall and label concepts or diagrams.
And William and Mary also listed teach a friend. That sounds like peak active recall.
It really is. Trying to explain something clearly to someone else immediately shows you where your own understanding is shaky.
Totally.
It forces you to retrieve the information, organize it coherently. Yeah, it's a fantastic method if you can do it.
Okay, so active recall is clearly a high utility superstar. What's the other sort of foundational technique mentioned prominently in the sources?
Spaced repetition, sometimes called spaced recall.
Right.
This is the technique of reviewing information at increasing intervals over time.
This feels like it directly attacks that forgetting curve we talked about earlier. You revisit the material just before it vanishes completely from your brain.
Exactly. It's based directly on that Ebbinghaus work from 1885. By strategically re-exposing yourself to the information right as you're starting to forget it, the effort required to retrieve it again significantly strengthens the memory encoding. It basically tells your brain, hey, this information is important, keep it.
And studies confirm this spacing makes a real difference compared to cramming.
Yes, definitely. Landauer and Bjork's 1978 study showed that a group using spaced repetition recalled significantly more names over time compared to a group that just reviewed them all at once, like massed practice.
Okay.
The sources even cite a study by Camp in 1989 showing benefits of spaced retrieval even for Alzheimer's patients, which just underscores how fundamental this principle is to how our memory actually works.
That's truly remarkable that it taps into such a core memory function. How do you apply this practically beyond just, deciding to review stuff again later?
Well, a classic practical application is the Leitner system for FLAC tests.
The box system.
Yeah, the box system. You divide your cards into different boxes. When you get a card right, it moves to the next box, which you review less frequently. If you get it wrong, it goes back to an earlier box for more frequent review.
Gotcha.
This automatically creates those increasing intervals for the stuff you know well, and it keeps the tricky stuff coming back more often until you nail it.
Like graduating your flashcards through different difficulty levels. That's smart.
Exactly. And the Christchurch Grammar Source provides a concrete example of possible spacing schedule they suggest. Review new material tonight, then maybe again 2 days later, then 1 week later, 1 month later, and maybe 3 months later. It's about building those increasingly longer gaps.
Okay.
The William and Mary source also gives a quick tip that kind of aligns with this idea of spacing, suggesting shorter study sessions with breaks, like maybe 15-minute increments. That introduces spacing even within a single study session.
Okay, so active recall and spaced repetition, the dynamic duo for memory, basically. What about actually maintaining focus and getting the work done during a study session?
Ah, well, that brings us to another technique the sources highlight, often rated highly, the Pomodoro technique.
The one named after the tomato timer.
Yay!
I feel like my desk needs one just for the aesthetic.
That's the one. Developed by Francesco Cirio back in the 80s, it's pretty simple. You break your work or study time into focused intervals, typically 25 minutes,
Okay.
separated by short breaks, usually about 5 minutes. And then after, say, 4 of these Pomodoros, you take a longer break, maybe 15, 30 minutes.
How does something so simple end up being rated so highly? What's the magic there?
The sources suggest its power really lies in managing your time and, crucially, your energy and focus. By committing to these short, defined bursts of work, you tend to minimize distractions because you know you only have to resist checking your phone or whatever for just 25 minutes before you get a break.
Right, makes it feel more manageable.
Exactly. And those regular short breaks help prevent mental fatigue and actually help maintain focus over the long haul. That William and Mary source specifically mentions that even short, like 15-minute brain breaks can significantly boost focus and productivity over a longer session. It helps you avoid burnout and stay sharp.
Okay, so the top 3 kind of evidence-backed pillars from these sources seem to be active recall for getting info out, spaced repetition for making it stick over time, and the Pomodoro technique for focused work bursts. But the sources also explore other valuable strategies, right? Maybe rated as moderate utility.
Absolutely. The University of KwaZulu-Natal and William and Mary sources discuss the Feynman technique, which is a fantastic method for really understanding complex ideas deeply.
The Feynman technique. How does that work? Explain it to me like I'm, well, like a novice, I guess.
Perfect. That's essentially what the technique is. You try to explain a complex concept in the simplest possible terms, as if you were teaching it to someone who knows absolutely nothing about the subject, maybe even like a child.
The old explain it to me like I'm 5 approach.
Exactly that principle. The William and Mary source actually breaks down the steps pretty clearly. First, you select your topic. Then you practice recall by trying to explain it out loud or maybe writing it down as if you were teaching it really simply.
Okay.
This process immediately helps you identify the gaps in your own understanding, those places where you stumble, or you use jargon you can't quite explain, or you just get stuck.
Right. It exposes what you don't know.
Precisely. Then you go back to your source material specifically to fill those gaps you found. Finally, you try to simplify the language even further, maybe use analogies, and repeat the process until you can explain it crystal clear, simply, and accurately.
That step about identifying the gaps feels really crucial. You find out what you don't know you don't know.
It is. It forces you to confront where your understanding breaks down and helps build those deeper, more meaningful connections between concepts. It's rated as moderate utility, maybe because it requires more active synthesis than just pure retrieval practice, but it's incredibly powerful for deep comprehension.
Interesting. Another one mentioned is interleaved practice. What's the deal with that? Sounds complicated.
It's actually about mixing things up. Interleaving means you mix different topics or different types of problems within a single study session. It's the opposite of what most people do, which is massed practice, studying one topic intensely for a long block of time before moving to the next one.
And mixing is better than blocking. It feels kind of counterintuitive, doesn't it? Like you'd get confused jumping around?
It does feel that way sometimes, but the sources explain why it works. It disrupts predictability. Your brain can't just go on autopilot using the same method it just used for the last 10 problems. You're forced to constantly figure out, okay, what kind of problem is this? Or what area of study does this relate to before you can recall the correct information or strategy?
So it makes your brain work harder each time.
Exactly. And studies show this improves long-term retention, makes you better at applying skills in different contexts later on, and it also reduces blocking. You know, that mental freeze you sometimes get when you have to switch gears after doing the same thing for too long.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
It helps with that. It's also rated as moderate utility, but has strong evidence behind it, especially for learning skills or problem solving.
Okay, so we've covered memory, focus, deep understanding, mixing things up. What about the absolute fundamentals, like taking notes or just reading the material in the first place?
Right, good point. Note-taking itself is highlighted as a really crucial active process in the Christ Church Grammar source. It's not passive, like just listening, Doing it well helps you engage, remember better, and can even extend your attention span during a lecture or reading. But the method you use for note-taking definitely matters.
And the sources get into specific methods. We mentioned Cornell earlier, but maybe let's unpack that one a bit more.
Yeah, the Cornell note-taking system, explained well in the Cornell source, is very structured. You divide your page into 3 main sections. A large column on the right for your actual notes during the lecture or reading, that's about 2/3 of the page.
Okay.
Then a smaller column on the left, about 1/3 for writing recall cues, keywords, or questions later on. And finally, a summary section across the bottom of the page.
And the steps they list sound really active. Record, question, recite, reflect, recapitulate, review. That's a lot of R's.
It is, but each step is important. You record your notes in the main column as you listen or read. Then soon, after this is key, you formulate questions or keywords in that left margin based on your notes.
Right.
Now, the crucial part is recite. You cover up the main notes section and try to answer the questions or explain the points out loud, just using the prompts in that left recall column.
So it builds active recall right into the note-taking process itself.
Exactly. And as the source notes, reciting out loud is really powerful for moving information into long-term memory. Studies apparently show students who do this perform better than those who just silently reread.
Reciting out loud. Interesting. Adds a whole other layer of engagement.
It really does. Then you reflect on the material, think about how it connects to other things you know. You recapitulate by writing a brief summary at the bottom, in your own words, another active step. And finally, you review frequently, ideally daily or several times a week, but mainly by using that left column for a recitation, not just rereading the main notes. That frequent, brief review is key for retention.
That's a very comprehensive system. What about more visual methods, like mind mapping?
Yeah, the University of Adelaide source gives a great overview of mind mapping. It's a very visual technique where you start with a central idea or topic in the middle of the page. And then you draw branches radiating outwards for related concepts, subtopics, and supporting details. It's fantastic for brainstorming, organizing really complex ideas, planning essays, or just seeing the relationships in the bigger picture between different pieces of information.
How do you actually approach making one effectively?
Well, you start with your main topic or question right in the center. Turning the page landscape often helps. Draw main branches for your primary ideas or themes, then add sub-branches for the supporting details. Use lines, maybe arrows, perhaps colors to show connections and hierarchy.
Yeah.
The Adelaide source gives some good advice, though.
Well,
Don't get bogged down in making it super beautiful initially. Get the ideas down quickly, leave plenty of space to add more later, and really focus on capturing the structure and connections in the information. While it might be rated moderate utility compared to pure retrieval practice, that visual overview it provides can be a great framework for understanding. The William and Mary source also mentions concept mapping more broadly as a way to show relationships visually.
gotcha. Are there other, maybe more standard note-taking formats mentioned?
Yes, definitely. The outline method, which both William and Mary and Christ Church Grammar mention, is that classic hierarchical structure. You use indentation to show major points, subpoints, supporting details. It's very effective for linear material, like information presented in a typical lecture format.
Right, the standard bullet points and sub-bullets.
Exactly. And then there's the charting technique.
Charting.
Yeah, the William and Mary source describes this as basically setting up a table or a chart to track specific types of information across different items. Think like comparing different historical events based on dates, key figures, causes, and significance.
Okay, like a comparison grid.
Precisely. It's especially useful for chronological material or when you need to compare multiple things across the same set of criteria. You can use it as a quick reference sheet later, or even cover up columns to self-quiz, another form of active recall. The Christ Church Grammar source also mentions T-notes, which sound useful for problem-based subjects or units. It suggests a simple 2-column layout, maybe for things like terms on one side and definitions on the other, or equations and examples, or theories and proofs.
Okay, different tools for different kinds of material. And wasn't there an interesting point about handwriting versus typing notes?
Yes, that was interesting. The KwaZulu Natal source, referencing some research from Washington University in St. Louis, notes that taking notes by hand might lead to better long-term retention than taking notes on a laptop.
Really? Why?
Well, the theory is that because most people can't write as fast as someone speaks, handwriting forces you to listen more actively, process the information, synthesize it, and summarize it as you write it down.
You can't just transcribe verbatim like you might typing.
Exactly. Typing can sometimes become almost mindless transcription. Handwriting seems to require more cognitive effort up front, leading potentially to deeper encoding of the material. It's also rated moderate utility overall, but it's a really interesting consideration in our digital age.
Definitely something to think about.
Huh.
So note-taking isn't just about recording information. It's actually a way to actively process it as it comes in.
Precisely. And speaking of taking information in, the sources also offer specific strategies for reading effectively, which is obviously core to a lot of learning.
Ah, yes. Tackling those dense articles or textbook chapters. What do they suggest there?
Well, some general tips first. Adjust your reading speed and style based on the material and your purpose. You don't read a novel the same way you read a technical manual, right?
Right.
Before diving deep, look at any questions provided, check headings, read summaries or abstracts to get an overview. Skim for the key points first to get the lay of the land.
Okay.
If you are highlighting or making notes as you read, the key is to combine it with active recall. Don't just color the page yellow. Pause frequently. Ask yourself questions about what you just read, note connections, and then test yourself later using those highlights or notes as prompts.
So highlighting isn't useless, just insufficient on its own.
Exactly. And actively writing down your own questions while you read is a great way to keep your brain engaged and focused on finding answers.
Makes sense.
The sources also specifically mention the SQ3R method, which is a really structured approach to reading comprehension.
SQ3R. Okay, what does that stand for? Sounds like a code name.
It does a bit. It stands for survey, question, read, recite, or recall, and review.
Okay, break that down.
Right. First, you survey the material, glance over the title, headings, subheadings, introduction, conclusion, look at any charts or pictures, get the big picture, the overall structure.
Here's your bearings before you jump in.
Exactly. Then turn those headings and subheadings into questions. What do you expect to learn in this section? What specific information are you looking for? This gives your reading focus and purpose.
Okay, makes reading more active from the start.
Then you read actively, specifically looking for the answers to the questions you just formulated. The third R is recite, or recall. This is crucial. After reading a section, maybe a paragraph or a few pages, close the book or look away and try to answer your questions or summarize the main points out loud or in writing, in your own words.
Ah, there's that active recall popping up again, built right into the reading process.
Exactly. It connects back to that high utility technique. And the final R is review, periodically go back over the material, maybe reread your notes, try answering your initial questions again without looking. This helps consolidate the information for long-term retention, especially before exams or writing papers. The sources even suggest you could create a chart based on your questions and fill it in as you read, combining it with the charting method.
That's a really robust system for tackling reading. Were there any tech tools mentioned for reading?
Yeah, the Pentium source briefly lists a few examples of types of reading apps. Things like Bookly can help you track your reading habits and make annotations digitally. Dolphin Easy Reader focuses more on accessibility, offering features like text-to-speech or customizable displays. And then there are apps like SwiftRead that are designed to help with speed reading techniques, if that's something you're interested in. So yeah, technology can definitely play a role in supporting these reading strategies too.
Well, okay, so we've gone all the way from facing that scary forgetting curve to identifying these really powerful high-utility methods like active recall, spaced repetition, and Pomodoro. Then we explored other really valuable strategies like the Feynman technique for deep understanding, interleaving for mixing things up, all those different note-taking methods like Cornell and mind mapping, the potential edge of handwriting, and now structured reading strategies like SQ3R and even apps. That's a massive toolbox we've untacked here.
It really is. And the goal of this deep dive was precisely that. To take this specific stack of sources you brought together and show how these concrete, evidence-based techniques can help you achieve what you're looking for, quickly and thoroughly gaining knowledge, having those aha moments of real understanding, and hopefully avoiding that feeling of being completely overwhelmed by information overload.
It really underscores the idea that effective learning isn't some kind of fixed trait you're just born with, is it?
Absolutely not. The sources collectively make it incredibly clear that effective learning is a skill. It's something that can be learned, practiced, and significantly improved over time just by applying the right strategies consistently. It really is about working smarter, not just necessarily harder.
And it seems like a lot of the real power comes from combining these methods, doesn't it? Not just using one in isolation.
Definitely. That's a key point. These techniques aren't mutually exclusive, they work best together. You might use the Cornell method to take your notes, which naturally includes prompts for active recall questions.
Right.
And then you use spaced repetition principles to schedule when you review those Cornell notes using the recall column. Or maybe you use the Pomodoro technique to stay focused while you're doing a session of interleaved practice problems.
Yeah, I can see that.
Even those methods rated moderate or lower utility, like summarizing or highlighting, they become much more powerful when you combine them with active recall. For instance, trying to summarize a chapter from memory first before checking the text, or using your highlighted sections not just to reread, but as specific prompts for self-testing later on.
So summarization helps distill the key points, but it's the active recall or the spaced repetition that actually helps you learn and retain those distilled points deeply.
Precisely. Think of it like building your own personalized learning system tailored to your needs and the type of material you're tackling, drawing from this rich set of evidence-based tools that these sources lay out.
This deep dive has been incredibly illuminating, honestly. It really shifts the focus from just what you're learning to how you're actively engaging with it.
Yeah.
So just to recap, we've covered active recall, spaced repetition, and the Pomodoro technique as those foundational high-utility methods based on the research.
The big three.
Plus those really valuable moderate utility strategies like the Feynman technique for deep dives, interleaving for flexible skills, various structured note-taking methods including Cornell and mind mapping, that interesting point about handwriting, managing your focus and environment, and structured reading approaches like SQ3R.
Yeah, a truly comprehensive toolkit based on your sources.
And it feels like it all comes back to this core idea. Learning is this ongoing, active process of retrieving information, connecting it, using it over time. So maybe the most important takeaway isn't just which techniques to use, but the commitment to the consistent practice of retrieving and connecting information again and again. How am I consistently applying even just one of these high-utility strategies truly reshape your understanding of how much you're actually capable of learning and remembering?
That's a great question to leave people with. It's about building those habits.